Today's daf is Samach Dalet, B'siyata D'Shmaya. And we saw with the Mishnah on Samach Gimel Amud Beis, 2 lines up before the end of the Amud. Ha'isha sha'amris kabali Gittin, she sends a shliach, appointing him to be a shliach leKabbalah, tzricha shtei kitei edim. In order to establish her status as a megureshes, to be mater l'shuk, she needs 2 pairs of edim. She needs 2 witnesses to testify about the minui shlichus, that they were there and they witnessed her appointing so and so as her shliach. And 2 more edim who will testify that the shliach received the get from the Baal, and he ripped it. The Gemara later on Daf Samach Dalet is going to explain why the edus of Befanai Kibel have to also rip up the get. And now the question is, do you need 2 kitei edim? That means Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. No, the Mishnah says afilu hema rishon ve'machronim. Both the substance of the edus could be from 1 pair of edim. And the Havamina was that perhaps we would have thought that maybe she hired this pair of edim to testify falsely. We're not choshesh for that. The Rishonim all ask the following question. We have a principle called davar v'lo chatzi davar in edus. So, for example, in Shalosh Shonim of Chazaka, if 2 edim testify in 1 year, another 2 edim on another, etc., there's a problem because it's a chatzi davar. Here too, it's a chatzi davar because each edus and each kat depends upon the other. So this is an issue that's addressed by the Rishon. Now we turn to Daf Samach Dalet. The Mishnah continues, O echad min harishonim v'echad min achronim. It could be that all told, you have 2 witnesses, and it could be 1 witness who testifies on the minui, and another witness who testifies on the Kabbalah. And we have 1 witness who could be mitzurif to echad mitztarif imoim. So you have, let's say, Reuven, who joins up with Shimon, and then Reuven himself will join up with Levi. And that means that Reuven is part and parcel of 2 kitei edim, 1 on the minui and 1 on the Kabbalah. And even though we've already established early in the Mishnah that we're not choshesh that she would have hired the edim, but that's a case where she hired 2 edim. In a case where she cut it down, then all she needs is 1 false aid who will testify in both the Nesina and the Minu. And therefore, we would have thought that maybe that aid is certainly hired by her and he's perjuring himself in the court, but Kamashba, no, we're not choshesh. Now we look at the Gemara, Itmar. Now this sugya is going to introduce a concept of a shlish, where a person who's a Bala Maisa gives over the object, let's say in the case of a get, in the case of a shtar, he gives over the object into the hands of a third party. We'll call it an escrow. And now we're going to discuss a case of a malva and a lova, or a mafkid and a nifkad. Say the malva gives over just 1 second, the other way around. The lova gives over money to a third party. And the malva says that that third party received the money as payment, as piron. The lova, for his part, contends that he only gave it to him as a pikadon, only to deposit the money in his hands. Or, for example, the case here, Baal Omer L'Pikadon, if, let's say, for example, in a case of a get, the Baal claims that he gave the get over to this person, not as a shliach to receive the get on behalf of the Isha, but rather as a bikadon. Right now, he wants somebody to watch and guard the get. He may use it in the future. So he puts it in the hands of a shlish. The shlish omeli gerushin. The shlish contends that he was appointed as a shliach lekabbalah by the Isha, and the Baal knowingly and deliberately gave the get over to him for the purpose of gerushin, minemon. And here, the Gemara records machlokes amoraim about whom we believe. Do we believe the Baal? Rav Huna Amar Baal Neman. For Rav Chisda Amar Shalish Neman. And the Gemara explains the machlokes. Rav Huna Amar Baal Neman dim isa de legerishin yavin anile l'dida havi yoev levanila. If in fact he had given the get over to the shalish as gerushin, then why didn't he do it himself? Why didn't he simply give the get to his wife? Why did he do it through a shliach? And the answer is that he was just depositing the get in the hands of the shlish. He didn't decide yet what he wants to give it. Rav Chisda Amar Shalish Neman Dohemne. The very fact that the Baal gives over the get, in this case to a third party, that means he's giving over nemanus, because at any moment that third party could deliver the get to his wife. And therefore, there's an nemanus of a shlish, and he's machzik the get to be a get. He's holding on to the get, and therefore he's believed to have received the get as a shliach lekabbalah. Now Rashi introduces here a concept called migu to explain Rav Chisda. And he says that since it's in the Yad HaShlish, he has the potential to give the get to the Isha. And once the get is in the hands of the Isha, she's believed to say that she's Nisgarsha. So too, even when the get is in the Yad of the Shlish, she's believed to say that the get was given to him b'toras gerushin, migu, that he could have simply given it over to the Isha, and she'd be believed to say megureshes. However, Tosfos Dira Maskel Shalish, the second Tosfos, rejects Rashi. He has a bunch of kashas, and he says the reason why the Shlish is Neman, according to Rav Chisda, is because once the Baal gives the get over to the Shlish, he hands over to the Shlish Nemanus, and Aldas came Masalo. He gives it over to the Shlish with the understanding that if the Shlish will come forward and say that he received it as a shliach lekabbalah shem gerushin, he will be believed. And the difference is because this logic of Tosfos and this reasoning would apply even if the get was given in front of two Eidim. And that would be a situation where, let's say, the migu of Rashi would not apply, but Tosfos' hemne would apply. Masiv Rabbi Abba. We go back to the Gemara. The Gemara quotes a brisa that seems to contradict Rav Huna. Hodas baldin kimea edim dami. A person who admits that he owes money to someone, it's as if, for all intents and purposes, 100 witnesses testified to the effect that he's chayav. The brisa continues. V'shalish neman mishneim. More than the two Bali Din, the shlish is believed ketzad. Zeh omer kach, v'zeh omer kach. The two Bali Dinim, each one says and puts forth his claim. Shalish neman. So again, as we said before, if the lova gives money over to the shlish will be neman, and we believe to say that he received it as piron for the chov of the malva. Or, for example, if there was a mafkid who put the pikadon into the hands of a shlish, the shlish is neman more than the two bali dinim. He has absolute unrestricted nemanis to say that the Baal gave it to him either as a pikadon or as a gift on behalf of someone else. And we see clearly here that we're not applying the logic of Rav Huna that, look, if he would have wanted to give it as a gift, he would have done so himself. No. But rather we apply the logic of Rav Chizda that the shlish is neman, either because of migu, or alternatively because of hemne, that the Baal gave him nemonis, or the mafkid gave him nemonis. And the Gemara answers, Shani mama di isyaev lemechila. All right, so this is a fundamental, shall we say, crossroads in the sugya, and the Gemara is distinguishing fundamentally between mammon and get. Get is the davar shebe isur, but with regard to mammon, since mammon lends itself to mechila, then it's more logical to assume that by giving your mammon, whether the lovel or the mafkid, into the hands of the shlish, the kavanah was to rely on the words of the shlish. And it means that even if the shlish would falsify the truth, nevertheless, a person could be mochel on his mammon, whatever mammon he gives to his friend. But in contrast, in the case of get, a person doesn't have the power and the authority to give over nemonis to a shlish. We need the absolute objective nemonis of two edim, because ein davar shebe'erva pachos mishnayim, and therefore shlish would not be believed. However, there's another understanding of this Gemara and the distinction being made by this Gemara, and that is that mammon is something that a person easily could be mochel, and therefore he's willing to be makneh whatever the shliach will say. That's called mechila. So there's haknah built in to the testimony of the shlish, haknah on the part of the mak. In get, we don't generally say there's mechila. We don't talk about mechila. It's not logical to assume, therefore, the Baal gave the get al das that the shliach will receive it b'toras kabbalah l'gerish. So Gemara says, how can you give such an answer? For Asanya, we have a brayso that says explicitly v'chein leGittin, that the nemonis of a shlish, above and beyond the other two parties, applies even to a get isha. And that's what it means when it says v'chein leGittin. So we see, like Rav Chizda, that the brayso maintains that even in Gittin, there is an nemonis of a shlish. Gemara answers no. You know what the word Gittin means? Gitei mammon, it means a shtar mammon. Let's say shtar matana. Let's say the Ruvain has two edim write a shtar matana to Shimon, and he gets the shtar from the edim and he deposits it in the hands of Levi. And Levi is going to be believed to say that Shimon, received that shtar b'toras matana, or alternatively b'toras pikana. For Asanya, Frekta Gemara, we have another brayso that says v'chein l'shtaros. So we see that it's not just v'chein leGittin, but also v'chein l'shtaros. So that means that we're talking about both get, and the shliach is shalish is neman in get and in shtaros. And the Gemara rejects this by saying midi gabi adodi tanya. Every Tana of every brayso uses his own language, his own style. But v'chein leGittin and v'chein l'shtaros, in all cases, we're talking about gitei mammon or shtare mammon. And that's dafka the only case in which the shalish is believed, but not in the case of gitei noshin. And that's Rav Huna shita. Now the Gemara asks a kasha on Rav Chizda. Tanan, our Mishnah says, Aisha sha'omer is kabali giti. Tzricha shtei kiti edim shnayim sheyomer fanenu amra, u'shnayim sheyomer fanenu kibel v'kara. She has to adduce two pairs of edim, one to testify in the mini shlichus, and another to testify in the kabbalah saget. V'amai lehemnei l'shlish. Why does the woman have to bring edim? After all, we could accept the testimony of the shliach. He's a shlish. And we should, according to Rav Chizda, believe him to say, number one, that he's a shliach, and number two, that he received the get from the Baal, and the Baal trusted him and gave him the get. And according to Rashi and many other Rishonim, the Ran, etc., they hold that the Gemara's kash is on both pairs of Eidim. We should be able to circumvent both pairs of Eidim. Tosfos, on the other hand, says that the Gemara's kasha is only that we shouldn't require Eidei Kabbalah, 2 witnesses to testify on the Kabbalah Sagerushin. Here he's Neman, and the Baal gave him Nemanis. As far as the Eidei Amira, meaning the Minu Shlichus, we definitely need 2 Eidim. So the Gemara answers, Mika Nafik Gita to say Yodid Dilehemne. When do we apply the principle of Nemanis of Shlish? That's when he's holding on to the get. And the Mishnah here is not talking about a case where the Shliach is holding on to the get, because the Mishnah says he ripped up the get. So if all the Nemanis of the Shlish is because he's holding on to the get, then he can give it to her. Or that indicates his Nemanis that he got from the Baal, but now the get is ripped. And he cannot give it again. So why would he have any Nemanis? And therefore you need 2 Kitei Eidim. Tenach Amra Kiba Lomel. I can understand why she needs 2 Eidim on the Mini Shlichus. That I understand. The get is Karua and he has no Migu. We'll go according to Rashi. But why does she need another pair of Eidim to testify that the Shliach received the get from the hands of the Baal? Even if it's ripped, nevertheless, the get is in his hands. And the Shliach has a raya now that he accepted and received the get from the Baal. Our Mishnah maintains the shita, the view of Rabbi Lazar, who holds that Eidim have to see the Mesiras HaGet, miyada Baal yada Isha, in order to give efficacy and validity to the get. The get is kores because there are 2 Eidim who witnessed the Mesiras HaGet. So it's not enough that we see the get in the hands of the Shliach and it's ripped. We need 2 witnesses that saw the Kabbalah HaGet. Gemara asks on the side, Kara Lomali, why does the Shliach rip up the get? When the Malchus made a Gzera on mitzvos to prohibit the Jews from doing mitzvos, they were afraid, the Jews, to leave the get alive and well, because maybe one of the enemies of the Jewish people get a hold of the get and he's going to further persecute the Jewish people, therefore they ripped it up. On the side, I can tell you, because I was Mashamish, the Botei Dinim here, there's another reason why they cut up the get, and that is so that no one should see the get and say, well, there's a mistake in the get, the names were were not written properly. Now the Gemara brings a case where even Rav Huna agrees and concedes that there is credibility against the Baal. Amar Rabba, umoder Rav Huna di Amra I. Even though Rav Huna holds that the Shlish is not believed, nevertheless he concedes that if she, the Isha, says L'didi Amar li Shalish, the L'gerishin Yavio Niale, I heard from the Shlish that the Baal gave him the get for the purpose of Gerushin. Mehemna, she's believed. The Gemara doesn't understand this. Mika midi the Shalish Gufe lo mehemna v'i mehemna. The Shlish himself would not be believed against the Baal. And now the Isha is believed against the Baal. Even if the Shlish would say what she's claiming he says in the presence of Beis Din, he wouldn't be believed. Her edus comes mikoach eduso shel shaliach, and the shliach himself would not be believed. So how can you tell me that Rav Huna would concede that she would be believed to say that the shalish received the get miyada Baal l'shem gerushin, when even if the shlish himself was here in Beis Din, according to Rav Huna, he would not be believed. Ella, but rather, that's not what Rabbah said. What Rabbah said was Moder Rav Huna the Amra if she says, Kamoi didi legerishin yavimili, I was there at the time that the Baal gave the get to the Shalish, and he gave it l'shem gerishim mehem, that she's believed. Why? Why should she be believed? And the Gemara answers, Migu de iboy omrla di da yahavile niala Baal. She would be believed to fabricate the truth and say that, you know what, he himself gave the get into my hands, and she would be believed, as we'll see later on, because Eina Isha Me'iza. So now too, even though she doesn't put forth that claim, but rather she says that I was there when the Baal gave the get to the Shlish, and for the purpose of Gerushin, she's believed. So the Gemara now brings a case where the Baal, the Isha, and the Shlish, they all unanimously agree that she was divorced, and they're not believed. Baal Omer, the Baal testifies, L'gerish, that I gave this get to a Shliach Lo Locha, that he should pass on the get to the Isha. Shalish Omer L'gerishin, the Shlish says that I received the get from the hands of the Baal for the purpose of Gerishin, and I gave it to the Isha, I delivered it. Vehi Omers, and even she's claiming, Nasan Li V'Yavad. The get was delivered to me and it was lost. So all three parties here agree that there was a get that was given to her as a kosher shlichus, and yet, Rabbi Yochanan, Havi Davar Shebe'erva, Mein Davar Shebe'erva, Pochs Mishnayim. We will not rely on the testimony of the Isha, because she has a cheskes eishes ish, she's asur kol olam, and in order to be matir that cheskes isur, you need shnayim, a minimum of 2 witnesses. And that's a principle that applies universally in Davar Shebe'erva. There's no nemanis, no credibility less than that of 2 witnesses. And since we don't here have 2 witnesses, because even though the Baal, the Isha, and the Shlish, they all agree that she was Nisgarsha, Kedasu, Kedin, they're not believed, because they don't have the status of 2 Eidim Ksherim. And therefore she's Asura, Mi Dineshes each. Frekti Gemara Vamai. Why does she need 2 witnesses? V'lehemni l'shlish. In other words, even if we accept the logic of Rabbi Yochanan, that Ein Davar Shebe'erva Pochs Mishnayim, we should still believe the Shalish. If he testifies that he received the get for the purpose of Gerushin, then, as we saw in Rav Chizda earlier, Shlish is believed. So amongst these 3 people who claim that the get was given L'Shem Gerushin, one of them is the Shlish. Why isn't he believed? Why do you need 2 witnesses? And Gemara says, Kika Nafik, Gita mi to say Yodim Lahemni, you're right. If he's holding on to the get, then he's believed to testify that she was Nisgarsha, and we would rely on his testimony. But that's only when the get is in his hands and he could give it to her, and therefore he's believed with a migu that he could have divorced her. But if the get is not biyado, then he doesn't have nemanis. He's like stam eidechad. And we apply the principle of ein davar shebe'erva pochos mishnah. I mean, let's just point out the obvious. If you go back to the language of the Brisa, it says the avad, meaning he's not holding on to the get. The Baal is motive that he divorced his wife. He has no vested interest to lie and say that he divorced his wife. He can divorce her himself. So if he testifies that he already gave her a bill of divorce and she was Niskarsha, then he would be believed. He's one of the 3 people who are testifying that she is Migureshes. Like Morantz's Mika, oh my Gerashti. The Baal is only saying that he gave the get to the Shlish as a Shliach Lo Lacha. he doesn't know whether or not the shliach actually fulfilled his shlichus and delivered the get. So the Baal can't claim girashti as ishti, and enochinami he would be believed to say girashti as ishti, but not in this case because he's not claiming that he knows that the divorce went through. So he's only claiming that he gave it to the shliach. Now, what happened to the shliach? The get was lost. So we don't know if the get was lost before he gave it to the Isha or after he gave it to the Isha. So we have a principle that's formulated by Rabbi Yitzchak, as we'll see soon. It's a Gemara Nazir on Daf Yud Beis. Chazaka shliach osa shlichuso. We always assume that if you appoint a shliach and he accepted upon himself to fulfill that shlichus, he's a serious guy and he's committed and he will fulfill his shlichus. The Omer Rabbi Yitzchak Omer l'shlucho tzei v'kadesh li'isha stam u'meis shlucho asur b'chol hanoshim sheba'olam. A shliach was appointed to marry off a woman, but on behalf of the Masechet did not specify which woman. And now the shliach died. Says Rabbi Yitzchak, we assume that the shlichus was fulfilled before the guy died, based on the chazakah. Now, any woman who wants to marry this Mishaleach might be a close relative of his own wife, an erva, because we don't know whom the shliach married on behalf of the Mishaleach. And chazakah shliach also shlichuso. So let's give the following example. There are two sisters, Rachel and Leah. And now the Mishaleach, after the Shliach dies, wants to marry Rachel. Maybe Rachel is a sister of Leah, and maybe it's possible that the Shliach gave Kiddushin to Leah, and therefore Rachel is Achos Ishto. Now the Gemara says, based on this principle, Chazaka Shliach Osa Shlichuso, why shouldn't the Shliach be believed? Or shall we say it a little better, why shouldn't we assume that since the Baal gave the get over to the hands of the Shliach as a Shliach L'Halacha, that indeed the Shliach Asa Shlichuso, and he delivered the get to his wife? Now, before we turn the Amud, if you take a look very quickly at Tosfos Divrei Maskel Asur, he quotes Rashi, and in the fourth line he says, Venira, based on Rashi, he says, the Knosa Bialmahu. No, I'm sorry. Let's go back, backtrack a little. I'm sorry. Rashi seems to indicate in this sugya that Chazaka Shliach Osa Shlichuso is a doraisa, meaning, as Rabbi Yitzchak says, he's also b'chol hanoshim sheba'olam. He can't marry any woman. That's a doraisa law. However, Tosfos disproves Rashi, and therefore he establishes that Knosa Bialmahu. The Ramban disagrees with Tosfos, but Tosfos holds that with the Raisa we rely on Rov, and Rov tells me that this woman that he wants to marry is not the sister of his wife. She's not an Arab. And not only that, Tosfos claims that the Chazaka Shliach Osa Shlichuso is not a Chazaka Gemura. So this whole din, according to Tosfos, is only a knas.